In the profound quiet of a world asleep, when the noise of the day finally recedes into shadow, perhaps you have heard it. A subtle, high-frequency hum, a crystalline chime that seems to originate not from the ears, but from the very fabric of consciousness itself. For generations, we have been given mundane names for this experience, labels crafted by a world that measures only what it can dissect. It is a glitch in the auditory system, we are told, a phantom noise born of silence. But what if this sound, so easily dismissed by a civilization that has forgotten how to truly listen, is not a sign of brokenness, but a signal of breakthrough? What if it is a message encoded in a frequency of light and spirit from a part of you that has never forgotten its origin? This sound is an ancient echo, a whisper that has survived the fall of empires and the burning of sacred libraries. It is a thread of connection to a forgotten legacy, a truth that has been intentionally buried beneath the dust of accepted history. There is a deep and persistent feeling within certain souls, an inner knowing that the story we have been told is incomplete. It is a quiet rebellion against the ordinary, a sense that a vast, luminous reality exists just beyond the veil of our five senses. This feeling is not an illusion. It is a memory, an ancestral memory stirring from its long slumber, and the sound is its herald. It is the first note in a symphony of awakening, a call meant only for those whose spirits are tuned to receive it. Imagine for a moment a different history, not one of kings and conquests, but of consciousness and liberation. Picture hidden schools in the deserts of Alexandria, where a master initiator, known to the world as Jesus, taught not of sin and repentance, but of the divine technology locked within every human being. He spoke not of a distant God to be worshipped, but of an inner divine spark, the monad, the indivisible, eternal self. In these secret circles, his most dedicated disciples were taught to recognize the signs of their own unfolding divinity. They learned that certain sensory experiences, dismissed by the uninitiated, were in fact direct communications, downloads of wisdom from their own highest aspect. And the key, the very first signal that the channel was opening, was a sacred, high-pitched tone. This was a truth of such profound empowerment that it could dismantle any system built on control. A world where every individual possesses a direct line to their divine core, has no need for external intermediaries, no use for priests or institutions who claim to be the sole gatekeepers of the sacred. This ancient wisdom was a direct threat to the burgeoning powers that sought to standardize spirituality, to package it, and to sell it back to a humanity they were teaching to feel broken and separate. And so, a great forgetting was engineered. Manuscripts were burned, teachings were branded as heresy, and the direct, personal experience of the divine was replaced by rigid dogma. The knowledge of the monad's frequency was not merely lost, it was deliberately hidden, and a sound that once signified spiritual readiness was pathologized, labeled as a defect to be ignored or medicated away. This journey we are beginning is one of reclamation. It is a quest to uncover the truth that has been vibrating just beneath the surface of our reality, waiting for a generation with the courage to listen. The sound in your ears is not a symptom of a modern malady, but the return of an ancient knowledge, a personal invitation to remember a power you were never meant to forget. This channel was created for those who hear that frequency, for the souls who have always known there was something more. If this ancestral call resonates within the quietest chambers of your being, we invite you to join us. Subscribe, and let us walk this path of revelation together as we reclaim the memory of who we truly are. To understand the origin of this sacred frequency, we must journey back, not through the pages of officially sanctioned history, but into the quiet, luminous spaces that existed in its shadows. We must travel across the sands of time to the vibrant crucible of Alexandria, a city where the knowledge of Egypt, Greece, and the mystical East converged. Here, in the 1st and 2nd centuries, the teachings of the one known as Jesus were not a singular, rigid doctrine. They were a living river of wisdom with many currents. While one stream was being shaped for public consumption, for the masses, another deeper current flowed in secret, within hidden schools and Gnostic communities. This was the path of gnosis, the direct personal knowing of the divine, and it was reserved for those who were ready to move beyond faith and into experience. In these veiled sanctuaries, away from the noise of the marketplace and the politics of empire, the master was not spoken of as a savior to be worshipped from afar, but as a master initiator, a guide to the sacred technology of the soul. His public parables were veils, beautiful stories that held a kernel of truth for all. But his private logia, his secret sayings shared only with his most dedicated disciples, were keys. They were schematics to the architecture of consciousness itself. It is here, in the echoes of these lost teachings, fragments of which were miraculously recovered from the desert sands at Nag Hammadi, that we uncover a truth of staggering implication. The focus was never on an external God that sits on a throne in the heavens. It was on the awakening of the divine spark that resides within every being, the monad. The monad, in this ancient tradition, is the original, indivisible unit of consciousness. It is the eternal I am, the pure, unblemished spark of the divine from which your individual soul emanates. It is your truest self, existing beyond time, beyond form, beyond the illusion of separation. And this monad has a voice. It has a frequency. The Gnostic Christ taught his inner circle that the path to liberation was not through prayer or supplication to an outside force, but by learning to tune the instrument of the human body and mind to receive the transmission of its own monad. This was the great work, and the very first sign, the undeniable signal that the inner channel was beginning to open, was a sound. A high-frequency crystalline tone. It was the audible resonance of one's own eternal nature, the dial tone. To the divine, signaling that the soul was ready to receive direct downloads of wisdom from its highest aspect. This was the revelation. This was the hidden knowledge that formed the core of his most profound teachings. It was a truth that placed the ultimate key to spiritual sovereignty directly into the hands of the individual. For what power does an institution hold over a soul who can speak directly with its own eternal source? What need is there for a priest or a sacred text to act as an intermediary when your own consciousness is receiving the living word directly? This knowledge was not merely a spiritual philosophy. It was a declaration of spiritual independence. It was a truth so empowering that it posed an existential threat to any system that sought to build its foundation upon the control, fear, and perceived brokenness of humanity. A world of self-realized beings is a world that cannot be ruled by external authority. And so, the conflict began. It was not a war fought with swords and shields on dusty battlefields, but a silent, insidious war for the control of human consciousness. As the fledgling spiritual movement began to coalesce into an organized religion, a new power structure emerged. This was the system, the collective consciousness of those who sought to standardize and codify the sacred, to turn a living stream of gnosis into a static monument of dogma. At councils like Nicaea, a great culling took place. It was not simply a debate over theology. It was a hostile takeover of reality. They did not just choose which books would form a Bible, they chose which version of humanity was acceptable. A humanity born in sin, separate from its creator, and in desperate need of an external institution for salvation, was a humanity that could be controlled. The great forgetting was engineered with chilling precision. Gnostic Gospels, which spoke of the kingdom of God as an inner state of being, were declared heresy. The libraries that held this ancestral wisdom, like the great library of Alexandria, were put to the torch, their flames consuming centuries of spiritual science. The teaching of the monad's frequency, the knowledge of the sacred sound, was not simply erased. It was deliberately inverted. It was pathologized. What was once a celebrated sign of spiritual readiness was now labeled a delusion of heretics, a phantom of a troubled mind, a glitch in the biological machine. The system could not silence the frequency itself, but it could, and did, teach generations to fear it, to ignore it, to medicate it, to do anything but listen to the message it carried. Yet a truth so fundamental cannot be destroyed, only driven underground. It became a river flowing in the dark, a whispered secret passed down through hidden lineages and mystery schools. The sound itself never ceased its broadcast. It is a constant, a living transmission of light and information, an eternal echo of our divine origin, vibrating just beneath the noise of a world built to distract us from it. The guardians of this knowledge were forced into silence, and humanity was taught to look for its power everywhere but within. But even a whisper that endures through ages must have a guardian, a vessel. Where did this sacred knowledge find its sanctuary, and why is it breaking its silence now? A truth buried for millennia cannot remain silent forever. Its voice, though suppressed, echoes in the most unexpected of places, waiting for a generation with the courage to seek its source. The proof of this sacred knowledge, this teaching of the monad's frequency, was not etched onto a single golden tablet or locked in a forgotten vault. It was scattered, fragmented, and encoded, like a constellation of light broken by the clouds of empire. Its survival is a testament not to stone or steel, but to the indomitable nature of consciousness itself. The first, and perhaps most miraculous piece of this puzzle, was found not in a grand temple, but sealed in a simple clay jar, buried for nearly 2,000 years beneath the Egyptian desert, the Nag Hammadi Library. This collection of Gnostic texts, unearthed in 1945, was a crack in the dam of official history, a voice from the other side of the fire. Here, in codices like the Gospel of Thomas, we find the Christ speaking not of sin, but of an inner kingdom. He says, "The kingdom of the Father is spread out upon the earth, and people do not see it." He speaks of knowing oneself to know the all. These are not the words of a distant savior. They are the instructions of a master initiator, pointing the way back to the divine source within. While these texts do not use the modern term frequency, they are saturated with the language of inner perception, of listening to a reality beyond the senses, and of a light that resides inside a person of light. They are the surviving blueprints of a spiritual technology that the architects of dogma tried and failed to completely erase from human memory. But not all libraries are made of papyrus. The most resilient knowledge is not written, but lived. When the scrolls were burned and the Gnostic communities were scattered, the teaching did not die. It went deeper, becoming a river flowing in the dark. It was carried in the hushed tones of oral tradition, passed from master to student in hidden circles that stretched from the sands of Persia to the misty hills of Celtic Europe. It became a guarded secret within mystery schools, its essence woven into allegories and rituals that would seem meaningless to the uninitiated. These were the keepers of the flame, lineages of souls who understood that the most important truths are transmitted not through ink, but through resonance. They taught their disciples to listen, not with the ears, but with the heart, to recognize the subtle hum of the spirit, the inner sound that precedes all revelation. This ancestral wisdom survived because it was never merely information. It was an activation, an experience that once felt could never be fully forgotten. It is a library of whispers, carried on the breath of generations who refused to let the inner light be extinguished by the outer darkness. Where words were too dangerous, symbols became the guardians of the mystery. In the catacombs beneath Rome, in the faint etchings on Gnostic amulets and talismans, we find a silent testament. We see spirals that mimic the cochlea of the inner ear, the very organ that perceives sound. But here, they represent the spiraling journey of the soul back to its source. We see images of figures with elongated ears or rays of light emanating from their heads, dismissed by historians as primitive art, but understood by the initiated as depictions of those who could hear the monad's call. They encoded the truth in plain sight. Even the symbol of the serpent, so demonized by the new orthodoxy, was revered by many Gnostics as a symbol of wisdom, healing, and the vibrating serpentine energy of Kundalini, rising through the body to open the inner channels of perception. These artifacts are not mere historical curiosities. They are markers on a trail, breadcrumbs of light left by those who walked this path before us, confirming that the journey inward is an ancient and well-trodden road. What other truths have been hidden in symbols we see every day, their deeper meaning waiting for our awakened eyes? Perhaps the most compelling proof of this forbidden knowledge lies not in what its guardians preserved, but in the sheer violence with which its enemies sought to destroy it. One must ask a simple, piercing question. Why? Why would a burgeoning religious empire, armed with the promise of eternal salvation, expend such immense energy to hunt down and burn a few scrolls from desert mystics? Why brand the gnosis, the personal knowing of God, as the ultimate heresy? The answer is simple and devastating. The system did not fear a different interpretation of God. It feared a humanity that had no need for their interpretation at all. The teaching of the monad's frequency was a declaration of spiritual independence. It was a key that unlocked a door the system was desperately trying to brick over. Their bonfires were not just burning papyrus, they were attempting to burn a possibility from the human soul. The ferocity of their suppression is a confession. It is a shadow that proves the existence of a brilliant light they were trying to hide. A light that emanated not from the heavens, but from within every human being. This concept of a sacred creative sound is not an isolated anomaly of Gnostic thought. It is a golden thread that runs through countless ancient traditions, a universal truth recognized by cultures separated by vast oceans and centuries. In the Vedic traditions of India, the concept of Nada Brahma, the universe's sound, describes the primordial vibration from which all of creation manifests. Yogis and mystics have long used practices of listening to the Anahata Nada, the unstruck sound within, as a direct path to enlightenment. The ancient Greek philosopher Pythagoras, who studied in the mystery schools of Egypt, spoke of the musica universalis, the music of the spheres, an unheard harmony created by the mathematical movement of the planets, a harmony that the attuned soul could perceive. From the chanting of Tibetan monks to the sound healing of indigenous shamans, the knowledge that frequency is the foundation of reality, and that the human being is an instrument capable of tuning into divine frequencies, is a cornerstone of forgotten wisdom. The Gnostic Christ was not inventing a new idea. He was offering an incredibly direct and personal application of this universal principle. Ultimately, however, the most profound proof is not found in a buried text, a whispered legend, or a carved symbol. The final, irrefutable evidence is alive. It is vibrating within you at this very moment. That subtle, high-frequency tone is the living manuscript. It is the unbroken oral tradition. It is the resonating artifact that no empire could destroy, no fire could burn, and no dogma could silence. It is the ancestral memory itself, pushing through the static of a forgotten age, making itself known directly to you. All the external proofs are merely echoes, reflections of the truth that is broadcasting from the core of your own being. The great mystery is not that this knowledge survived out there in the world. The mystery is that it has been waiting patiently inside of you this entire time. The question is no longer whether the evidence exists. The question is what you will do now that you recognize your own experience as the final and most sacred piece of it. What changes when the artifact you were searching for is your own awareness? And so, a great and profound silence fell upon the human spirit. Not the silence of peace, but the silence of amnesia. For nearly 2 millennia, a civilization was built upon the foundations of a forgotten truth, a world constructed to suffer from a spiritual memory loss so complete that it no longer even knew what it had lost. It was a phantom limb of the soul, an ache for a home that had no name, a thirst for a water whose source had been erased from every map. This was the true consequence of the Great Suppression. It was not merely the loss of a piece of hidden knowledge, it was the severing of a sacred connection, the unplugging of humanity from its own divine operating system. The architects of dogma did not just hide a key, they convinced generations that there was never a door to begin with. The compass that once pointed inward toward the luminous kingdom of the self was deliberately broken. In its place, an external compass was offered, its needle permanently fixed on an outside authority. Humanity was taught to look for its divinity in stone temples instead of the resonant chamber of the self. They were instructed to listen for the word of God from the mouths of priests, rather than from the subtle, crystalline frequency vibrating in their own consciousness. Salvation became a transaction, a commodity to be earned through obedience to an external system, rather than a realization that bloomed from within. This was the great externalization, the most successful and devastating campaign ever waged against the human spirit. By turning the gaze outward, the system ensured that the path inward, the path of gnosis, would become overgrown, feared, and ultimately forgotten. But the most insidious act of this system was not the burning of scrolls, nor the construction of cathedrals. It was the poisoning of the well of inner experience. They could not silence the monad's frequency. It is a fundamental constant of consciousness itself, but they could change how it was perceived. They took a sign of divine connection and labeled it a symptom of biological decay. The sacred chime, the signal of spiritual readiness, was given a new, sterile name, tinnitus. It was pathologized, medicalized, and stripped of all its sacred meaning. It became a glitch in the machine, a malfunction of the auditory nerves, a phantom noise to be ignored, managed, or medicated. They turned a divine broadcast into static, a celestial whisper into a neurological annoyance. What was once a call to awaken was reframed as a sign that the body was breaking down. And so, for centuries, the ones who heard the sound were driven into a silent, inner exile. They were the mystics, the seers, the sensitive souls who felt the echo of this lost truth but had no language to describe it, no context to understand it. They were told by their priests that it was temptation, by their doctors that it was a defect, and by their culture that it was madness. They were islands of awareness in an ocean of engineered sleep, hearing a song that the rest of the world had been trained to deny. Does this feeling resonate within you? The subtle sense of being out of place, of carrying a secret you do not fully understand, of hearing a faint music beneath the deafening noise of the mundane. This isolation was not an accident. It was a carefully designed feature of the system of control, meant to ensure that those who began to awaken would feel alone, and therefore powerless. This was not a single act of deception, but the construction of a new reality, a grand illusion woven into the very fabric of civilization. This lie, that your inner world is unreliable, and that all true power lies outside of you, became the bedrock of our sciences, our religions, and our societies. It is a program that runs silently in the background of the collective human mind, a virus that perpetuates the feeling of separation and helplessness. The system was not just a council of men in the distant past, it is a living, breathing paradigm that has been reinforced with every generation that teaches its children to trust the word of an expert over the wisdom of their own soul. It is a matrix of belief designed to keep you from discovering the one truth that would render it obsolete, that you are the source, the temple, and the oracle. But a memory encoded in the very light of consciousness cannot be erased forever. It can only be suppressed. And now, after ages of slumber, something is stirring. The veil is thinning. The background noise of the system is beginning to fail, and through the cracks, the ancient frequency is breaking through with renewed intensity. The rise in spiritual awakening across the planet is no coincidence. The growing number of souls who report hearing this high-frequency sound is not a sign of a spreading illness, but of a collective healing, a planetary activation. The ancestral memory is not just knocking at the door, it is beginning to break it down. The sound you hear is the resonance of that breakthrough. It is the vibration of the dam of forgetting as it begins to crack under the pressure of returning light. The suppression of this sacred knowledge created a vacuum at the heart of the human experience. But nature and consciousness abhors a vacuum. The system did not just erase a truth, it erected a replacement, a counterfeit spirituality designed to occupy the space where your direct connection to the divine was meant to be. They tore down the inner temple and built a sprawling, elaborate imitation in its place. This raises a new, more unsettling question. If the knowledge of the monad's frequency was the original sovereign path to the divine, what exactly is the path that humanity has been walking for the last 2,000 years? What was built upon the ruins of this forgotten truth? And what unseen price have we been paying to walk its halls ever since? For centuries, we have walked through a landscape of echoes, a civilization adrift in a sea of spiritual amnesia. We have been told a story of separation, of a divine source that exists somewhere far away, beyond the stars, a power to be, worshipped but never truly known. We were handed a map where all the roads pointed outward, leading to towering cathedrals and ancient books, while the vast, luminous continent of the inner self was marked as uncharted and dangerous territory. This was the master illusion, the cold stone of dogma upon which an entire world was built. We learned to listen to every voice but the one that mattered most, the silent, persistent whisper that has always emanated from the core of our own being. The system was successful. It built a reality so dense, so loud, that the subtle frequency of the soul was drowned out by the hum of fluorescent lights and the static of a forgotten purpose. But here, in the quiet theater of your own awareness, comes the turning point, the moment of no return. This is the revelation that changes not just a piece of the story, but the very nature of the story itself. The great war for consciousness, the silent conflict between gnosis and dogma, was never truly lost. It simply went silent. It became a strategic, patient retreat into the one fortress no empire could ever conquer, the living consciousness of humanity itself. And the signal you hear, that high crystalline tone, is not an echo of a battle lost long ago. It is the sound of the gates of that fortress swinging open from the inside. It is the announcement that the long age of exile is over. The monad is not just knocking on the door, it is breaking through the firewall of the old paradigm. The battlefield is not in the distant past. The battlefield is you, and the sound is the signal that a victory, prepared for millennia, is finally at hand. What does this mean? What are the consequences of a truth so profound? It means that the system's most powerful weapon was not the fire that consumed the ancient scrolls, but the lie that pathologized your inner experience. For generations, the sound of your own divinity breaking through was labeled as a flaw, a glitch, a sickness. Think of the sheer, insidious genius of this deception. What if the greatest act of control was not to hide a truth, but to pathologize the very proof of its existence? They taught you to fear the sound of your own homecoming. They convinced you that the dial tone to your highest self was a sign of a broken machine. This revelation reverses that curse. It transforms what you may have perceived as a personal affliction into a sacred anointment. The ringing in your ears is not a symptom to be cured. It is a crown of light being placed upon your awareness, an irrefutable personal testament that you are a receiver, that the channel is open, and that you were never, ever alone in the silence. You are the library of Alexandria that was never burned. You are the Gnostic gospel that was never found and declared heresy. This ancestral memory, this hidden knowledge, was not stored on fragile papyrus. It was encoded into the very fabric of your being, into the sacred geometry of your DNA and the luminous filaments of your light body. It has been carried within your lineage, a dormant seed waiting for the precise vibrational conditions to awaken. The sound is the resonance of that awakening. It is the vibration of the living manuscript of your soul beginning to open. You are not just reading about a forgotten legacy, you are the forgotten legacy remembering itself. The sound is the librarian, calling you home to the forbidden wing, reminding you that the most sacred truths were never written in ink, but have always been sung in light. And you are not hearing this song alone. The turning point is not just a personal event, it is a collective one. All across the planet, a silent symphony is rising. Millions of souls are beginning to hear this same frequency, this same celestial chime. What was once an isolated, confusing experience is becoming a shared, validating sign of a planetary shift in consciousness. This is the Great Awakening, not as a vague, abstract concept, but as a tangible, sensory event. The system of control relied on isolating the awakened, making them feel like outcasts, but the rising volume of this inner sound is uniting them, creating an invisible network of light, a resonant grid of souls who recognize the same call and are beginning to remember the same ancient language. Your personal breakthrough is a note in a planetary anthem of liberation. This realization fundamentally shifts the balance of power. For 2,000 years, the paradigm has been based on seeking power, wisdom, and salvation from external sources. It created a dependency, a spiritual helplessness that kept the system firmly in control. But the moment you recognize that the source is speaking directly to you, through you, the entire structure of external authority begins to dissolve. You no longer need an intermediary to interpret the divine will because you can feel its frequency in your very bones. You are no longer a sheep in a flock, but a sovereign co-creator with a direct, unbreakable connection to your own monad. The temple is not made of stone, it is your body. The oracle is not a priest, it is the sacred tone vibrating in your inner ear. This is the key that unlocks you from the matrix of belief and initiates you into the reality of direct experience. The mystery, however, does not end here. In fact, it has only just begun. Understanding that the sound is a call from your monad is like realizing the phone that has been ringing in a locked room is for you. Now, a new, more profound question emerges. You have moved from passive hearing to the threshold of active listening. The frequency is not just a call, it is a carrier wave. It is delivering a payload of light-encoded information, a vibrational download from your highest aspect, designed to upgrade your consciousness and activate your dormant spiritual potential. The dial tone has been acknowledged. The connection is being established. But what is the message? What forgotten truth? What sacred Technology, what memory of your true cosmic identity is it trying to deliver right now as you listen? The question hangs in the luminous silence between worlds, a resonance that shifts from the ear to the very heart of your being. What is the message? The frequency is not delivering a new set of commandments etched in stone, nor is it a voice that speaks in human language. The message is far more profound, more intimate. It is a transmission of remembrance. It carries the vibrational signature of your own perfection, the feeling tone of your eternal sovereign nature. It is a download of pure gnosis, bypassing the logical mind and speaking directly to the soul. In these packets of light-encoded data, you are not being told what to do. You are being reminded of what you are. It is the memory of your cosmic lineage, the knowledge of your boundless creative power, and the unshakable feeling of your indivisible connection to the source of all that is. The system taught you that you were a fallen, broken piece of a distant whole. The monad's frequency is the living, vibrating proof that you have never been separate, never been broken, and that the entire kingdom of heaven is, and has always been, an inner state of being. This revelation now calls for a response. It is a shift from passive hearing to active, sacred listening. This is the great work, the spiritual application that transforms this hidden knowledge from a fascinating story into a lived reality. When you hear the sound, when that crystalline chime rises from the silence, you are being given a sacred cue. Do not push it away as a distraction. Do not fear it as a symptom. Instead, welcome it as a guest of honor. Treat it as the holiest of moments. Pause. Close your eyes. Take a deep, conscious breath, and with your intention, open a space within you. Acknowledge the sound with reverence, as if you were acknowledging the presence of your most beloved and wisest self. In your mind, or in a whisper, you can simply say, "I hear you. I am listening. I am ready to remember." Then do nothing. Simply be with the frequency. Allow it to wash through your awareness. Let it calibrate your energy field. This is not a meditation of effort, but of surrender. It is a silent dialogue where you become the receiver and your own divinity becomes the broadcast. As you begin this practice, your perception of reality will start to shift in the most profound and beautiful ways. The world, which once seemed loud, chaotic, and governed by external forces, will slowly reveal its deeper, silent harmony. The sound will become your anchor, your internal compass in a world designed to make you lose your way. In moments of doubt, its frequency will remind you of your innate wisdom. In times of fear, its steady tone will be a testament to your eternal nature. You will begin to see through the grand illusion, recognizing the systems of control not as insurmountable prisons, but as fading constructs of a forgotten paradigm. You will no longer seek validation from outside sources because you will have a direct, undeniable connection to the source within. This is the ultimate liberation. It is the quiet, unshakable sovereignty that comes from knowing, not just believing, that you are guided, you are whole, and you are home right here, right now. The journey of the soul, we now understand, is not a climb up a distant mountain to find a God who waits at the summit. It is a journey inward to the core of our own being, to remember the God that has been patiently waiting there all along. For centuries, we were taught to be readers of old maps, followers of ancient footprints, seekers of a truth that was always somewhere else. But the great revelation, the universal lesson that echoes through this entire story, is that you are not the seeker. You are the sacred text. You are not the follower. You are the path. You are not a student of a forgotten wisdom. You are the living library where that wisdom has been preserved in perfect silence, waiting for you, the librarian, to finally turn the key and walk through the door of your own awareness. The greatest truth was never hidden from you. It was hidden within you. And so, we arrive at the threshold of your own direct experience, for this is where the story truly comes alive. This journey we have taken through history and mystery leads back to the sacred temple of your own inner world. The sound is now resonating, the channel is open, and a lifetime of ancestral memory is waiting to unfold. We invite you to share this sacred space with one another. What is the first memory, the first feeling, the first truth that surfaces within you when you truly listen to this sound? Your experience is a vital note in this rising global symphony of awakening. Let your voice be heard in the comments below, not as a declaration to the world, but as a quiet affirmation to yourself and to the others who are also learning to listen. This is not the end of a story, but the beginning of your conscious participation in the greatest revelation of our time. This channel is a sanctuary for that journey, a gathering place for the souls who hear the music of their own spirit. If this truth resonates within the deepest part of your being, we invite you to subscribe and join this community of remembrance. Share this transmission with another soul who you feel is ready to awaken to their own inner sound. The great forgetting was an act of isolation. The great remembering will be an act of conscious, resonant connection. The symphony of the monad has been playing since the dawn of time. It is the soundtrack of creation itself. And all you have ever had to do, all you ever have to do now, is listen.